Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we need to do something a little different.
Mm.
Usually, we're right there on the bleeding edge, We're trying to predict what's going to happen 6 months or a year from now.
Right.
We love the
I
speculative.
love the what if. That's our whole thing.
Exactly. But today, I think we need to just stop for a second. I need us to look at the calendar and really, really ground ourselves in the present moment.
It is February 3rd, 2026.
February 3rd, 2026. And the reason I want to start by just staring at that date is because the world feels, I don't know, profoundly, fundamentally different than it did just 2 years ago. Do you remember the vibe in early 2024?
Oh, I remember it vividly. It felt like a gold rush. It was a carnival. I mean, it was a complete fever dream.
It really was. It was a party, and not just that, it was a party where everyone was invited.
Everyone.
If you had a laptop, an internet connection, and a pulse, you were a founder. You were a visionary.
It was absolute mania. You had these startups, and I'm not exaggerating, raising $10, $15 million.
Oh,
And it was based on nothing. Nothing more than a landing page they'd thrown together in a weekend.
right, with a really nice font.
A really nice sans serif font, yeah. They just slapped the word agentic across the top, plug in an OpenAI API key on the back end. And that was it. That was the whole business plan.
And the investors were just as manic. It wasn't just the founders who were caught up in this.
No. The investor mindset was essentially, shut up and take my money. But they were terrified, genuinely terrified.
Of missing out.
Of missing out on the next big platform shift. They looked at ChatGPT, they looked at Claude, and they thought, this is the new internet, this is the steam engine, and if I don't own a piece of it, my fund is dead.
So due diligence was, what, a 5-minute conversation?
It was optional. The only question they really asked was, how fast can you ship? Not, is this a good idea, but can you get it out there by next month?
Okay, so let's fast forward. We're here, February 2026, and we are looking at a landscape that has been completely scorched. The party lights are on, the music stopped about 6 months ago, and there is broken glass absolutely everywhere. We're calling this deep dive the digital desert.
It's really the only metaphor that fits. The whole market has sobered up.
Sobered up is a good way to put it.
We've moved from the AI is magic phase to the AI is expensive infrastructure phase.
Yeah.
And a desert is a harsh environment, right? Hype evaporates instantly in the desert. You can't drink hype.
It is brutal out there. I was looking at the Q4 2025 earnings reports from the tech sector just to prep for this, and the tone is just heavy. It's so serious.
It's a bloodbath for anyone who didn't adapt. It's pure Darwinism. Only the organisms, or in this case, the businesses, that figured out how to survive with limited resources and just brutal efficiency are still standing.
So this vibe shift is very, very real. It's no longer about how many stars you have on GitHub or how cool your demo video is on X.
Not at all. Today, if you walk into a VC office on Sand Hill Road, they aren't asking about your grand vision for AGI or how you're going to save humanity. They do not care about your philosophy.
No.
They are looking you dead in the eye and asking, where is the profit?
Where's the eating profit? Yeah.
Exactly. They are looking at EBITDA. They're looking at the cost of your tokens relative to the lifetime value of your customer. It's a complete return to fundamentals.
But with this technological twist, this AI twist that has caught so many people off guard.
Completely.
So our mission today, for you listening, is to dig through this wreckage. We want to understand what happened to all that hype, analyze these brutal new economic rules that are governing 2026, and then we want to identify the vanguard,
The survivors.
the roughly 5% of companies that actually made it through the purge.
And we're going to cover some pretty wild stuff, like why your favorite writing app probably just disappeared overnight.
Yeah, that happened to a lot of people.
We're going to talk about why we are suddenly seeing servers being launched into orbit, literally into space. And we're going to discuss a brand new job title that is absolutely trending right now, the AI ROI Auditor.
I want to start with the casualties, though. Before we get to the survivors, we need to understand the scale of the destruction. We're calling this first section the Great Filter.
A very fitting name. Over the last 2 years, we have witnessed a mass extinction event for a very specific type of company. The industrial term for them is the thin wrappers.
Thin wrapper.
I see.
It just sounds flimsy saying it. So what exactly defined these companies? Because in 2024, they looked like real businesses. I mean, they had logos, they had employees, they had users.
Oh, they certainly pretended to be businesses. The business model that dominated 2024 and pretty much all of 2025 was essentially just building a beautiful user interface directly on top of a major model.
Like GPT-4o or Claude 4.5 or whatever the latest thing was.
Exactly. The startups didn't own the intelligence. They just rented it. They were tenants. They built a nice skin, maybe added some convenient buttons and a slick onboarding flow, and sold that as a product.
I remember these so vividly. Chat with your PDF, write better marketing copy, plan your meals with AI. I probably subscribed to 3 or 4 of them at one point.
Me too. And let me ask you, are you still subscribed to any of them?
No, not a single one. I canceled them all about a year ago.
And that is the story of the entire market. The valuation of these companies has just completely collapsed. We are talking about a drop of 95% in value if they haven't already gone to zero.
Which most of them have.
It's what the industry is now calling the exit to nowhere. You raise all this money, you hire all these people, and then you just fizzle out. No acquisition, no IPO, just gone.
It sounds incredibly ominous. But explain the mechanics of the failure. Was it just that they were bad products? Because honestly, some of them were actually quite slick to use.
No, that's the tragedy. Many of them were great products. The UI was polished. They were a pleasure to use. The fatal flaw was entirely one of strategic vulnerability.
Rented land problem.
They built a castle on rented land. And when you build on rented land, the landlord can change the rules or the rent at any moment.
Or the landlord can just decide to live in your castle.
That is the Sherlocked phenomenon. And in the AI space, this was the biggest killer by far.
Sherlocked. This goes way back to Apple history, right? For those who don't know the term.
Decades ago. Apple had this search tool called Sherlock. A small developer built a much better version called Watson. Apple saw it, liked it, and then just built all of Watson's features directly into the next version of Mac OS.
And Watson died.
Instantly, you got Sherlocked. Your brilliant idea gets absorbed by the platform owner, and your business evaporates.
And we saw this happen at an industrial scale with AI. The pace was just breathtaking.
A pace we have never seen before in tech. Let's take a concrete example. The PDF summarizer startups. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds.
All doing the same thing.
Pretty much. You upload a 50-page academic paper or a legal document, and it tells you what it says. It was a great utility. People paid for it.
For a time.
For a time. But then OpenAI announced a new model with a context window of 10 million plus tokens.
Which basically means you can feed it a giant novel and it remembers the whole thing.
The entire thing. So suddenly you didn't need a specialized app anymore. You just dragged the file directly into ChatGPT and said, summarize this.
And just like that, an entire category of startups, their value proposition hit zero.
Overnight. We're talking about companies with millions in funding and dozens of employees that became obsolete between a Tuesday press release and a Wednesday software update.
Wow. Let's talk about another one, the AI copywriting tools.
Oh, another massive graveyard. There were unicorns minted in 2024 based purely on helping you write blog posts or emails. Companies worth over $1 billion.
I remember those. They were everywhere.
And then what happened? Google integrated Gemini directly into Google Docs and Gmail. Apple put intelligence into the core operating system.
So it was just there.
It was just there. Why would you pay $20 a month for a third-party writing tool when your word processor already anticipates your next sentence for free as a native feature?
You wouldn't. It's the path of least resistance. The user's not going to tab out to another app, log in, and paste text back and forth if the feature is native to the tool they are already using.
Precisely. And this all leads to the one critical question, the killer question that investors are asking in 2026. It's the moat question.
This is what separates the living from the dead.
Absolutely. If you pitch a startup today, they will stop you mid-sentence, look you in the eye, and ask, what stops Sam Altman from adding your feature to ChatGPT next Tuesday?
That is a terrifying question because for 95% of those companies from 2024, there is no good answer.
If your answer is nothing, or, well, we have a better UI, or we have a really passionate community, the meeting is over. You are considered a corpse walking.
It's so interesting because back in the gold rush, the UI was the product. We genuinely thought design would be the key differentiator.
We all did.
We thought, okay, the model's the engine, but we are building the luxury car around it, the leather seats, the nice dashboard. That's our value.
And it turns out that was completely wrong. It turns out intelligence is the commodity and distribution is the king.
And the big players, Google, Microsoft, Apple, OpenAI, They own all the distribution.
They own the screen you are looking at right now. They own the browser. They own the phone in your pocket. They can push a feature to a billion users with a single software update. You can't compete with that.
But there's another layer to this extinction event. It wasn't just about features getting Sherlocked. It was about the money, the actual hard numbers. The unit economics of AI turned out to be a trap.
This is the part that really blindsided the founders, even the smart ones.
How so?
They thought costs would just go down forever. They saw the price of tokens dropping, and they banked on Moore's law applying to intelligence costs in a nice, predictable, linear way.
Well, to be fair, I remember reading headlines for 2 years straight saying token costs are dropping, it's getting cheaper to be smart, the cost of intelligence is approaching zero.
And that is factually true. The price of tokens, which is, the cost to process a word or a piece of a word,
Yeah.
it dropped something like 95% over the last 2 years. It is incredibly cheap to process one word.
So why is everyone going broke? I mean, that's the paradox here. If your primary raw material is 95% cheaper, your profit margins should be through the roof.
Because of a little thing called the Jevons paradox.
Okay, you're going to have to define that for the non-economists listening.
So the Jevons paradox is this observation from the 1800s about coal. The inventor Jevons noticed that as steam engines became more efficient, Britain didn't use less coal.
It used more coal.
It used vastly more coal. Because it was so efficient, people found new uses for it. They built more factories, more railways. The efficiency unlocked a tidal wave of new consumption.
So we aren't just doing the same things with AI cheaper. We are doing wildly more complex and ambitious things that we never would have even attempted before.
Exactly. And this brings us to the agentic loop trap. This is the silent killer of the 2026 startup.
We hear the word agent thrown around constantly, but break down the loop for us. How is it different from just asking a chatbot a simple question?
Okay, so in 2024, the whole paradigm was prompt leads to response.
One in, one out.
Right. You ask, what is the capital of France? The model thinks for a second and says, Paris. One input, one output. It's cheap. It's predictable. You can calculate the cost of that interaction down to a fraction of a penny.
Got it.
But we move beyond that to agents. You don't ask an agent for a fact, you give it a goal, a complex goal. You say, find me the 10 best potential enterprise clients for my cybersecurity business in the Chicago metro area.
Okay, then it just goes to work.
It goes to work, but let's look at the mechanics under the hood. It doesn't just search once. First, it has to think. That's an API call. Its thought is, okay, I need to break this down. First, I'll search for top companies in Chicago. Then it executes a Google search. That might be an API call to a search tool. It gets a list of 100 companies. Then it has to analyze that list. It thinks, okay, now I need to visit the website of each of these 100 companies to see if they're a good fit.
So that's another 100 tasks.
At least. It visits the site, reads the content. That's a huge API call to process all that text. It analyzes it, and it thinks, this one's in manufacturing, not a good fit. It discards it. Then it goes to the next one. This one is in finance. They might need cybersecurity. It makes a note.
It's creating its own to-do list and checking it off as it goes.
And looping back on itself. It might cross-reference its findings with LinkedIn to find the right contact person.
Yeah.
Then it might draft a personalized email. Then it might critique its own email. No, that tone is too aggressive, and rewrite it.
So a single user request from me.
A single user request can easily trigger 100, 200, sometimes even 500 separate model calls in the background.
Wow. So I, as the user, I just see one task being done. I see the little spinner on the screen. It's the tip of the iceberg. But under the water, the engine is revving hundreds of times.
And here is where the mad problem kills you. Let's say you're a startup and you charge the user a pretty standard $20 a month for your AI sales assistant.
Okay, seems reasonable.
But because of these incredibly complex agentic loops, that one active user, just by using the product as intended, costs you $15 a month in API fees to OpenAI or Anthropic.
So you're left with $5.
You're left with $5 gross margin. Then you have to pay for your own servers, your developer salaries, your marketing, your office space.
You are so far underwater.
You aren't running a sauce business at that point. You are running a charity for Sam Altman. You are just acting as a pass-through entity, collecting money from users and handing it directly to the foundation model providers while taking a massive loss on your own operations.
That is a brutal Brutal realization. And it explains this burn rate reality we're seeing. Even a supposedly lean startup in 2026 is burning through, what, $45,000 a month just to keep the lights on and the API keys active?
And that's for a small team. The growth at all costs playbook from the 2010s is completely dead. The new formula is strict, painful ROI. The equation that investors use now is literally profit from automation minus the cost of GPU and tokens, all divided by the cost of development.
And if that number isn't positive,
If that number isn't positive from day one, you do not get funding, period.
this incredible focus on the bottom line has actually spawned a whole new career path, hasn't it? The AI ROI Auditor.
This is one of the hottest trends in February 2026. It is a fire trend, as the kids say, and frankly, it's my favorite new job title. It's so dystopian and perfect.
I love the concept. It's like the repo man, but for bots.
It is exactly that. Think about the corporate psychology of the last 2 years. Every Fortune 500 company spent millions, sometimes hundreds of millions, in 2024 and 2025 just frantically integrating AI.
They had to. The board demanded it.
They bought the hype. They deployed customer service bots, internal knowledge agents, coding assistants for every developer. It was the innovation era.
Right. You had to have an AI strategy.
But now, in 2026, the CFO is looking at the balance sheet and asking a very simple question. We spent $10 million on this. Where is the savings?
So the auditor comes in.
The auditor comes in like the Grim Reaper with a clipboard. They don't look at the fancy slide decks from the innovation team. They ask for the raw API logs. They ask for the Git commits. They ask for the customer support ticket resolution times before the bot and after the bot.
They're looking for the ground truth.
The ground truth. And what do they usually find?
I have a feeling it's not good.
They often find the productivity illusion. Let's take the coding assistants, for example. The promise was always, your developers will code 50% faster.
Which sounds amazing. Any CEO would sign off on that.
Of course. But the auditor digs in and finds that while the initial generation of code is indeed 50% faster, the debugging of that AI-generated code takes 200% longer.
Why?
Because the AI hallucinated a library that doesn't exist, or it wrote incredibly subtle bugs that are very hard for a human to spot. It looks right, but it's fundamentally flawed.
So the net productivity of the entire development cycle actually went down.
In many, many cases, yes. Or it stayed flat, but the cost of the software licenses went up by $2 million a year. The auditor's final report usually concludes with a very blunt recommendation to call the herd.
Call the herd. Ouch.
They'll say something like, keep the coding assistant for the senior engineers who know how to manage it, but disable it for all the junior developers immediately. And kill the internal HR bot entirely because the logs show only 3 people have used it in the last 6 months.
That is a massive, massive pendulum swing. We went from AI will do everything for everyone to, can we please justify the cost of having AI do this one very specific thing?
And that constraint isn't just financial. This is the part of the deep dive where we have to look away from the code and look at the physical power plant.
The energy bottleneck.
We are hitting hard physical limits in 2026. And this is a sentence I never thought I'd say, but electricity is now more expensive and scarcer than intelligence.
That is a profound statement. Say that again.
Electricity is scarcer than intelligence.
Explain that.
Intelligence is everywhere. It's abundant. You can download an open source Llama model to your laptop right now for free. But the sheer electrical power required to run the massive data centers for the foundation models, that is a finite resource, and we are running out of it.
I've seen reports about this. Data centers are straining local power grids to the point of causing blackouts, right?
Yes. In places like Virginia and Arizona, cities are putting moratoriums on new data center construction because they literally cannot supply them with enough power without risking the grid for residential homes.
We can't just build more data centers on Earth. We've hit a wall.
A physical wall, which is why we're seeing these infrastructure hedges becoming a major investment theme. This is where things get a little sci-fi, but it is real life now. It is very real. When land and power on Earth become too expensive and too scarce, you have to look elsewhere. And that's why we are seeing Project XAI and other similar ventures launching servers directly into orbit.
Servers in space. It still sounds like a James Bond villain plot to me. I'm putting the data in space, Mr. Bond.
It does, but you have to look at the raw thermodynamics of the problem. What is the single biggest cost in running a data center after the electricity itself?
Cooling.
Cooling. You have to spend a fortune on air conditioning to keep these thousands of GPUs from literally melting. They run incredibly hot.
Right, it's a huge waste of energy just fighting the heat they generate.
Well, what's the temperature of outer space?
close to absolute zero.
Right. Space acts as an infinite heat sink. It offers free, limitless cooling. You just radiate the heat away.
Yep.
And what else does space have in abundance?
So-
Unfiltered 247 solar power. There are no clouds, there's no night, there's no atmosphere dimming the rays. You have a constant free source of massive energy.
So you launch the compute to where the energy and the cooling are essentially free. It's not a gimmick, it's a cold, hard, economic calculation.
Precisely. It's a pure infrastructure hedge. It's a public admission that planet Earth simply ran out of cheap electricity for our computational ambitions.
But there's another angle to the space thing, isn't there? It's not just about heat and power, it's about laws and regulations.
Yes, this is the sovereignty angle, and it's a huge deal. Think about the regulatory environment on Earth right now. You have the EU AI Act, you have US executive orders, China's extremely strict regulations, data centers on the ground are heavily regulated.
But space is basically international waters.
Effectively, if you have a constellation of orbital data centers, you aren't just escaping the heat, you are potentially escaping legal jurisdiction. It becomes a data haven in the sky.
That opens up a whole can of worms. If a model is running on a satellite that's currently passing over Brazil, is it subject to Brazilian law?
The international lawyers are going to be very busy and very rich for the next decade figuring that one out. But this whole idea connects to a broader trend we're seeing back on Earth too, which is the move away from the centralized cloud entirely. It's the de-Googleization of infrastructure.
We're calling this sovereign infrastructure. For a long time, the logic was just put everything in the cloud. It was simple.
It was simple, but in 2026, companies are waking up to the massive security and economic implications of that strategy. Sending your proprietary corporate data to a public API like OpenAI's or Google's is like shouting your most valuable trade secrets through a megaphone in the middle of a busy train station.
You might get an answer back, but you have no idea who else was listening.
And you don't know who's recording it or what they'll use it for later. Once that data is out there, you can't get it back. Plus, being totally reliant on cloud APIs is now seen as a sign of weak intelligence in your overall business strategy. You are completely dependent on a competitor's pricing, their uptime, their terms of service.
So what's the alternative?
Yeah.
Is a mid-sized law firm in Ohio supposed to go out and buy their own racks of NVIDIA H100s? Those things cost a fortune.
That's the common misconception. You don't need the top-of-the-line H100s to do most of the work. You don't need a supercomputer to run an SLM.
An SLM, a small language model. Define that for us.
So these are models that are much, much smaller than something like GPT-5. They don't know everything about the universe. They can't write a poem in French about a toaster while explaining quantum physics.
They're specialists.
Exactly. They are very, very good at a few specific tasks. And thanks to a process called quantization, we can now run them on ridiculously cheap hardware.
Quantization. That sounds like something out of Star Trek.
It's actually a pretty simple concept. It's like data compression. Imagine you have a beautiful high-definition photograph. Quantization is like compressing it into a JPEG. It looks almost the same to the human eye, but the file size is a tiny fraction of the original.
So you're making the model file smaller without making it significantly dumber.
You got it. You reduce the precision of the numbers inside the neural network. So now, that law firm in Ohio, they don't need a supercomputer. They can go buy a $3,000 rack of Mac Minis or even a few high-end consumer gaming PCs.
And run their own AI.
They install a quantized llama model that's been fine-tuned on legal documents. It lives in their building, in their server closet. It costs $0 per token to run, just the cost of electricity. And most importantly, their confidential client data never, ever leaves the room.
So we're seeing a great fragmentation. The math of God models live in the cloud or even in space for the huge general-purpose tasks. And then you have millions of tiny specialized models running locally for the day-to-day work.
That is the mature, sensible architecture of 2026. Specific beats general is the new mantra.
So, okay, we've covered the graveyard of the thin wrappers, the brutal economics of agentic loops, and the physical energy crisis. It feels a bit bleak, honestly.
Yeah.
But you mentioned a vanguard, the 5% who survived. Who are they?
There are survivors, and they aren't just surviving, they are thriving. We can generally categorize them into three main buckets. The first, and maybe the most important, is vertical AI.
What makes them different from the thin wrappers we talked about? They're still using AI, right?
Yes, but it's how they use it and what they use it on. Vertical AI is built for dirty, complex, highly specific niches. Think Oil extraction, specialized biotech research, maritime law.
So not write me a better marketing email.
Definitely not. These companies survive and thrive because they have what we now call data moats. They possess unique, proprietary data sets that exist almost entirely offline.
Offline data, that's the real key, isn't it?
It's the whole game. Think about it. Google and OpenAI have scraped the entire public internet. If a piece of information was ever on a public website, they have it in their training data, but they don't have the last 50 years of private seismic surveys from an oil company. They don't have the private longitudinal patient records of a specific hospital network.
So if you have valuable data that the big models can't access, you have a defensible business.
That is the only way to defend yourself in 2026. Let's take a really unglamorous example. Industrial HVAC repair.
Heating and cooling for giant buildings. Not exactly sexy.
Not sexy at all, but think about the data. The technical manuals for a 1985 industrial chiller unit are not on a neat website. They are in dusty, three-ring binders in a basement somewhere. The service logs are handwritten notes from technicians over 30 years.
Google has no idea that stuff even exists.
Exactly. So a vertical AI startup goes into that industry. They digitize that specific, messy offline data. They train a small, specialized model on just that information. The model only knows one thing: how to diagnose and repair that specific HVAC unit. They sell that as a tool to repair companies. That is a moat.
Because for Sam Altman to compete with you, he would have to physically send people to find those binders in that basement.
And he's never going to do that. It's far too small and specific for him to care about, but it's a billion-dollar business for the startup that does.
So the new strategy is go where the internet isn't.
Go where the internet ends. That is where the profit begins in 2026.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. What's the second category of survivors?
The second category are the agent orchestrators. These are companies that wisely stopped trying to build a better brain, a better text generator, and instead started building the factory.
The workflow around the brains.
Exactly. They don't make the workers. They build the assembly line and the management structure. They solve the process. Imagine a typical software development agency. You have a product manager, a designer, a coder, a QA tester.
Right, a whole team.
An agent orchestrator builds a platform where Agent A is a specialized product manager model. The user gives it a request and it writes a detailed technical spec. It then hands that spec off to Agent B, the coder model. Agent B writes the code and passes it to Agent C, the QA model, which tests it for bugs.
So the key isn't the individual agents, because those might still be using commodity models.
Right. You might plug in Claude for the creative part and a fine-tuned Llama for the coding part. The value, the moat, is in the management layer, the orchestrator.
It handles the handoffs, the revisions, the communication between the agents.
Precisely. If the coder agent writes bad code, the QA agent rejects it and sends it back with notes. The orchestrator manages that entire feedback loop. They don't build the brain. They build the digital meeting room where the brains collaborate.
And where does the human fit into this picture?
The human sits at the top, like a manager, ideally just pressing the final approve button. Or, in the reality of 2026, the human is frantically trying to intervene when the agents get into an infinite loop arguing with each other about the correct implementation of a button.
Which brings us right back to the burn rate. An argument between bots must be expensive.
Oh, you have no idea. If your AI agents get into a philosophical argument, you are paying for every single word of that argument in token costs. That is the definition of life in the digital desert. If you aren't constantly watching your water, your money, you die of thirst very, very quickly.
Okay. And the third and final category of survivors.
This one's the most obvious. The infrastructure winners, the people who sold the shovels during the gold rush.
Or, in this case, the people selling the electricity and the cooling systems.
Exactly. The companies solving the hard physical problems, the ones building novel cooling solutions, the ones integrating small nuclear reactors directly with data centers, the space server companies we mentioned earlier. As long as the global demand for compute continues to exist, these companies basically print money.
It's so fascinating. The bubble didn't pop in the way the dot-com bubble did, where the technology itself was questioned. AI is still here. It's more powerful than ever.
The bubble didn't pop, it just deflated. It squeezed out all the hot air, all the hype, the magic, the tourists. AI in 2026 is just boring. And I mean that as the highest compliment.
Boring is profitable.
Boring is profitable. It's becoming like electricity or the internet itself. It's just infrastructure. It's either profitable infrastructure or it's unprofitable infrastructure, but it is no longer magical.
So, for our listener, the learner, who is trying to navigate this new landscape. Maybe they're an investor, maybe they're a founder, or maybe they're just trying to decide what tools to use at work. What is the final advice from this deep dive?
I would boil it down to 3 simple rules for 2026. First, and most importantly, count the tokens.
Don't get distracted by the demo.
Don't look at the cool features or the slick UI. Look under the hood at the unit economics. Does the cost of running this tool make any logical sense compared to the value it creates? If not, don't build it, and for God's sake, don't buy it.
Okay, rule number 2.
Seek the hidden data. If you are looking for real defensible value, look for things that are not on the open internet. Look in the basements, the filing cabinets, the proprietary databases. That is where the alpha is. That is where the real competitive advantage lives now.
And rule number 3.
Ignore the hype. Just completely ignore it. If someone is selling you another wrapper app that promises to change your life, run away. If you truly want to invest in the future of AI, look at the physical constraints. Buy NVIDIA stock, sure, but better yet, look at energy stocks. Look at the companies building the power grid. The bottleneck is always the real opportunity.
That is solid, grounded advice. You know, this whole conversation raises one more really provocative thought for me as we wrap up. We've talked so much about the economics and the hardware, but what about the content itself? The stuff we read and watch online?
What do you mean by that?
Well, if we have these billions of agents all running in these infinite loops, generating trillions and trillions of tokens every single day, we are now living in a world where 99%, maybe more, of all digital content is just AI slop.
That's the dead internet theory becoming reality.
It's not a theory anymore, it's just reality. The internet is mostly bots talking to other bots to train other bots. So it feels like the next great challenge, and maybe the topic for our next deep dive, isn't generating content anymore. We've solved that problem to death. The great challenge of our time is verifying what is actually human.
I think you're absolutely right. In an infinite sea of synthetic noise, the single most valuable signal will be the one you can prove with certainty came from a human pulse. Proving authenticity is the new frontier.
Something to mull over. We'll leave you with that thought. Thanks for joining us today in the digital desert. Stay hydrated, count your tokens, and we'll see you next time.